New unlikely Raw Tag Team Champions, The Fiend, strikes for the first time since SummerSlam. The King of the Ring tournament gets underway, and does Rey Mysterio retire? My name is Alex, and this is 6 Things We Learned from Monday Night Raw. The biggest news from Monday Night Raw, we have new Raw Tag Team Champions in the form of Seth Rollins and Braun Strowman. Two men we predict to be going at it at Clash of Champions for the Universal Championship. This story started when AJ Styles took on Braun Strowman in a United States Championship defense that was thrown out due to a disqualification. It was predictable, it was boring, and after the match when Strowman was beat down, Rollins came out and made the save. However, things got a lot more interesting as we headed towards the main event, as Rollins and Strowman were competing for the Raw Tag Team Championships. Throughout the match, Styles played distractor on the outside, and eventually Braun Strowman would take out Styles and Gallows and make a hot tag into the match. Strowman would power slam Carl Anderson, and just as Styles tried to get in the ring to break up the pin and throw this match out by disqualification, Seth Rollins hit him with a nasty curb stomp. Strowman got the pin, and they are our Raw Tag Team Champions. I can't see the title reign going longer than a week, maybe two. However, it was a nice feel-good end to Raw, much better than last week's end with Strowman and Rollins. The Fiend, Bray Wyatt, strikes for the first time since SummerSlam, and this segment was really quite well done. Because it was advertised as Sasha Banks on the King's Court. Jerry the King Lawler is in the ring, and just before the segment started, Becky Lynch cut a promo on Sasha Banks, so it felt like this was going to be all about Banks and Lynch. Jerry the King Lawler was in the ring rambling on about the King of the Ring tournament, and then all of a sudden we started to hear those Bray Wyatt screams. Then we got some of the worst acting I've ever seen from Jerry the King Lawler as he tried to look scared and blundered up to the entrance ramp, and then in classic horror film fashion, the Fiend would emerge from behind Jerry the King Lawler and hit him with that mandible claw. I thought Cole sold it brilliantly on commentary with the behind you, and then down went Jerry the King Lawler. It was all about the false advertising of this being about Sasha Banks and Becky Lynch that made this segment work. The only negative was Vic Joseph took over on commentary instead of Nigel McGuinness from the now absent Jerry the King Lawler. The King of the Ring tournament got underway on Monday Night Raw, and I did a video on 6 superstars that could win that tournament, and straight away one of my picks is out. Samoa Joe beat Cesaro in this first round matchup, and the match started really well. Cesaro legitimately nearly killed Samoa Joe with an uppercut straight away in the match. That sort of brought me back to that Extreme Rules match with Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn, when Sami Zayn straight out of the gates hit the haluva kick, and it's just such a nice way to start a match. There was springboard, corkscrew, European uppercuts from Cesaro. Samoa Joe hit a suicide dive into a flying forearm that literally sent Cesaro into the front row. Samoa Joe got caught in the Cesaro swing that then was transitioned to a sharpshooter and then slipped into a crossface. A really nice transition from Cesaro. But finally, the Coquina clutch would be applied to Cesaro and he would tap out, and Samoa Joe would move into the final 8. Later in the night, it was more disappointing. Cedric Alexander and Sami Zayn's match was short, and it was one of rest holds. These men didn't get the opportunity to show their explosive offense, and after a neuralizer and lumbar check, this match ended far too quickly with Cedric Alexander emerging victorious. I don't know why Sami Zayn always keeps losing so fast, but it is frustrating. The matches from SmackDown Live were announced. Tomorrow night, Elias and Kevin Owens and Apollo Crews and Andrade will kick off things on the SmackDown side for the King of the Ring tournament. But on the Raw side, Ricochet and The Miz teamed to take on Drew McIntyre and Baron Corbin in the match that was probably match of the night. It's hard to pick. There was no clear winner tonight. However, this match was simply just to advertise The Miz versus Baron Corbin and Ricochet versus Drew McIntyre next week. This match would end when Ricochet would hit a lung blower to Baron Corbin to pick up the win. And obviously this move can no longer be called a code breaker because Chris Jericho is now the enemy in AEW. So Maggle, I'm here for you. It's called a lung blower, and Ricochet used it on Baron Corbin to pick up the win. The Sasha Banks situation continues with yet another attack on Natalya. Sasha Banks' interview with Jerry the King Lawler was delayed by The Fiend. It comes around later in the show with Michael Cole. Michael Cole asks her what's up, and she says her hair's what's up, isn't blue her colour. To which Michael Cole replies, no one cares about your hair. And it was actually quite funny. And I think Michael Cole versus Sasha Banks would be more interesting to me than Banks versus Lynch. But oh well. He then goes on to ask another question and rambles on. And Sasha Banks simply replies, you're welcome. And there's very little progression in that interview. Later on in the night, Natalya is in a backstage sort of promo straight into the camera, and she's saying about what a rocky week it's been to her. She doesn't understand why Sasha attacked her and why she did what she did. And then Sasha Banks goes and attacks her again. During the attack, she says to Natalya, "Go to hell, Natty, and tell your dad I say hi." At this point, I put in all caps in my notes, wrong. It's uncomfortable. It's cheap. You can't just use death for heel heat. I said this last week. I'll say it again. Just don't do it. It's wrong. There are authentic, legitimate ways of building heat, and that's not how you do it. And also, Sasha Banks calls Natalya a crybaby, and that is very, very ironic. So I'd like to remind everyone, the reason Sasha Banks has been absent from TV for 4 months is because she was a quote-unquote crybaby at WrestleMania when she had to drop the tag belts and didn't like the booking decision and threatened to leave the company. So Sasha, just be careful what you call Natalya there. Does Rey Mysterio retire? Well, Rey Mysterio had requested time before Raw and said on Twitter that he was going to go out there and had something very important to say. He was actually in a backstage interview which kind of told me he wasn't going to retire. And he talks of the insult and lucha libre tradition of Andrade ripping off his mask. And he says he sees moves in his head, but his body doesn't follow through, and that the injuries have finally caught up to him. And then he goes to retire and take his mask off. Just as he's taking his mask off, his son Dominic comes out and stops him. Rey Mysterio is crying, and he says, don't retire. You need to teach me. You need to team with me in the ring, which means it's going to be Dominic and Mysterio, perhaps winning the tag team championships over the next sort of year or so. Rey Mysterio almost retires, but he hangs on for his son. And now it's time for that fast fire round of all the other matches that took place on Monday Night Raw. The opening contest saw the wild card from SmackDown Live, Roman Reigns, take on a wild card from I don't know where. I don't know what roster Ziggler's on. They really need to sort out the rosters. But before the match, Ziggler cut a really funny promo. He said, quote, "I'm not some Twitter keyboard warrior like all wrestling fans." True, that's literally what I'm doing right now. He describes The Miz as Maurice's husband that beat him with Ric Flair's move. He insults Goldberg's part-time schedule, saying he thought he had to wait 6 months between each spear, and even calls Shawn Michaels a DZ wannabe. The match is solid but predictable, with a zigzag on the floor, a zigzag in the ring that Reigns kicks out of, and then Ziggler starts to mouth off, looks for a splash in the corner, and gets speared in half. Then there's a tussle between Elias and RTruth for the 24/7 championship. Elias is in the ring, saying this is his last concert ever because he's now going to be the future king of the ring. He's going to be 24/7 champion, so he can't be out there. It's too risky doing these concerts, but he's having technical difficulties, so RTruth comes in the ring disguised as a sound guy, tries to roll Elias up with a couple of leverage pins. Elias keeps kicking out and even escapes a scissor kick and runs away with the 24/7 championship. The New Day takes on the Revival, Woods and E as wildcards from SmackDown Live, and as Big E is looking to charge through the ropes and tackle or spear Scott Dawson, Randy Orton hits an RKO out of absolutely nowhere. He then goes on to have a head-spiking RKO on Kofi Kingston. Then Scott Dawson and Dash Wilder pop Woods in the air for another RKO, so it's an absolute RKO frenzy. And then Orton holds down Kofi Kingston as the Revival injure the leg of Xavier Woods. Woods sells it really nicely, and I just put sadistic Orton is the best Orton because that is so true. And Alexa Bliss and Nikki Cross, as of course the women's tag team champions, take on Fire and Desire, a wild card from SmackDown Live that Mandy Rose and Sonya Deville. And I said it, I'm glad that they have the belts on TV more than the Iconics. As much as I like the Iconics more, I'm glad the belts are out on TV. And I said this is the only ever good wild card. It's Mandy Rose. I also put that it's nice. I looked at Sonya Deville's attire. She had the rainbow one. It's nice LGBT representation in WWE, and it's a big step from the days of Billy and Chuck's gay marriage. The match ends with the Purge, which is that swinging neck breaker from Nikki Cross to Sonya Deville, and Bliss and Cross win. And there you have it. 6 things we learned from Monday Night Raw. Please remember to like, share, subscribe, turn notifications on, and leave a comment. It really helps us out here on the channel. And thank you for your support so far. I'd also like to turn everyone's attention to a series that's been launched by my SmackDown Live colleague, Ryan, who is looking at a superstar or a champion and predicting their next 6 pay-per-view outcomes. So please go and stare into Steven Gerrard's crystal ball and have a look at that series because it's doing really well. And once again, thank you for watching 6 things we learned from Monday Night Raw.